Welcome back to Benny's Custom Works, proudly supported by Valvoline and Sparesbox. Don't forget BCW5 on checkout. This week, we're finally back on the Sigma. It's been a long time coming, and I don't actually have all the parts to finish this job yet, but I'm as excited as you guys are, so I wanted to get in and make a start. The plan today, which probably we won't get done, but we'll give it a crack. We're going to pull the 2 litre and the auto out. That's also going to mean we're going to pull the shifter out inside the car, which I've just actually remembered now, which is going to mean pulling center consoles out. All going to come out, get it on the ground. We'll pull the parts off of the 2 litre that we need to transfer to the 2.6. So that's going to be things like the alternator, the crank pulley, and some other bits and pieces. We've also got a 4G Race Solutions alternator tensioner already on this engine that we're going to transfer to the new engine. And while it's out, we'll probably fit our Gilmer drive and other bits and pieces. So we're going to dive straight on in. So let's get to it. Carby things. Be gone. Oh no, that's something else. Who knows? There's lots of hoses on this carby and I don't know what 90% of them do. Good times. I also like when you got a vac line that's just jimmied off with a bit of random wire. Sorted. Like look at this part. Like that's the sort of stuff that stops old cars running. Like that vac line was actually the vacuum advance retard line to the distributor. So it probably explains why this thing's been so lazy to drive, because there's been zero vacuum advance. Never seen that before, eh? They must have had an issue where they were vibrating loose or something. Yeah, you see that? Exhausting work. Old school exhaust junk. Get rid of all these donut hangers too. Put some round bar in there. This is actually the same muffler that's on Mark's 1200 on Barrel Brothers channel. This was a Yahoo find and I started looking on Yahoo after Mark got his one. So this was a couple of $100, which is probably a little bit for a muffler, but being that it's stainless and it's actually really hard to find a round single in to twin out in Australia. I don't know why that is, but being that it's also fully polished, it's literally ready to weld on. So yeah, that's pretty nice. And the tip length's actually really good. That's pretty much the position we're gonna end up at, give or take. And the round muffler is very much similar sizing to the original, well, the previous Sigma muffler that was on it. So I think this will work pretty well. Still deciding if I'll put a resonator in the middle of it or not, but at least we got the option. And yeah, this was the hardest part to find. So one of the things that's actually held the project up a little bit. I'm just going to take the gearbox mount off because it might get hung up pulling it out of the car. Oh, that's crusty. I'm going to pull this 90-degree adapter out and hope that it fits the 5-speed. Stranger things have happened. Testing the tensile strength of whatever it is I forgot to undo. And also if I should have taken the fan. So there's a corner that's been cut out of the battery tray and I was wondering why that was. Well, it's just been made apparent that the alternator actually hits the battery tray and they've cut the corner of the battery tray out to take the engine out rather than take the alternator off. Like, I was like, why would you bother cutting that tiny amount off the battery tray? Well, now we know. That gearbox has, I'd say, never actually been out of the car, looking at just how much dirt and grime is on that. Like, there's solid 40 plus years of grime on that. So now we're pretty much going to strip the bits we need off of this engine. So that's going to be distributor with the leads, the alternator with the brackets, and the fan. I don't think we actually need the pulley off the water pump anymore. The one thing I did just realize is we actually still need a water pump for this engine. I think I've got one at home, so I'll either put it on today, or we might just do that in the next episode when we continue fitting along the bay. But yeah, the plan today is at least get the engine and the 5-speed in the car. So yeah, there's a few things that we need to do before we get that in, like fitting all these bits up. So we're going to keep on going. In the process of assembling the engine and putting the Gilmer drive pulley onto the crank pulley, I turned it over and started to hear this metallic scraping noise.
What is that?
Crank touching the windage tray. That's not the sort of thing you want to hear on a freshly assembled engine. Even more so one that you haven't actually touched the bottom end. However, we did have the sump off and the timing cover off, so it was very tinny kind of sort of scraping sound, not a hard thudding sound. So I was pretty confident it was tied into the sump somehow, and looking at the sump, it's previously been hit. It is an older thing, but I didn't want to knock it out because it's actually quite hard to get to the section where it's damaged. But the thing that I didn't really take into consideration was this previously had a cork gasket, whereas we've then removed it and used a Permatex sealant to basically reseal the sump to the block. I'm not a massive fan of cork gaskets because they can rot and break down, and they're a bit old school. Having said that, in this case, it's actually caught me out because the thickness of the gasket is probably what stopped the baffle in the sump actually touching the crank counterweight previously. So I had to quickly whip the sump off, clean all the sealant off, find where it was rubbing, bend that back into the correct shape. But now that's all back together and we're where we were an hour ago. So gonna spin this thing back over and put a water pump on it, put the rest of the Gilmer driver on, put the belt on, and continue with fitting it back into the car. So interestingly, the distributor, I'm pretty sure was actually one tooth out because it was all the way retarded in the advance. So now we've got the rotor button pointing at number 1 with the distributor somewhat in the middle of the slot. So to me, it's in the right spot now because the adjustment's actually usable. Kool-Aid. Unbearable. Oh, even the bearing didn't like my joke. Well, this hasn't gone to plan. Well, for once we've actually gotten everything done that I said we were going to do. That being said, it's not in the capacity that I was hoping. So the 2.6 and 5-speed, the engine mount bolts in, but the transmission mount definitely isn't a bolt-in affair. Now, I don't know if that's because factory manual and auto cars may be different. The shifter position is a lot further back than I'd imagined as well. So there's going to be some measuring. I've got a manual parts car that I do want to go home and confirm kind of what's going on there. Interestingly, the manual and auto center console is the same. So that leads me to believe that maybe we've got a transmission from something else other than what the seller said it was from. They assured me that the engine and transmission both came out of a GE Scorpion. However, that should mean that would bolt into this car. And it should also mean the shifter position should line up. So I'm a little bit dubious as to that information, along with everything else that he said. It kind of just adds to the joy of buying secondhand stuff off Marketplace. But that being said, it's in there. Everything's usable. It's just going to mean more work, but I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, pretty stoked to have it in there. Transmission and engine went together pretty well. It wasn't too fussy. The only other thing that was missing actually was when I got the engine and transmission, it had no bell housing bolts. So I went and bought aftermarket bolts this morning, but after looking at the 2-litre auto, the bolts were all the same. So I put the aftermarket ones in that to keep it together and then put the factory ones back into this. It's just fiddly little stuff, but to me, it kind of makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So yeah, next episode on the Siggy, we'll probably get all the cooling system pretty well sorted. We're going to be having a look at a lot of racework stuff for that. I want to do pretty much all AN line for that, put some bulkheads in the firewall and run them down to the heater core. I do also have a new heater tap to put on the heater core. So there's all sorts of little stuff that's actually going to happen during the course of this sort of repower that are going to get, that has been needing to be done for quite a while. So the other thing I have to do is also measure a tail shaft, because I was hoping that there would be an off-the-shelf tail shaft option for this. However, looking at how long this box is, I think it may actually be from a Triton or something else, not Sigma. So yeah, we're going to have to potentially revisit that and maybe just get a shaft built. Not the end of the world, but also not quite the pretty much bolt-in conversion that I was hoping. But yeah, I mean, you get that with builds as well, so it is what it is, and probably a little bit of a shame on me for assuming it was all just going to go in. But yeah, it is what it is, and I'm pretty keen to keep pushing forward with it. Yeah, appreciate the support as always, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.